I believe the date is August the 21st, 2016. I call to order this meeting.
22nd.
Oh, let's correct that. It is August 22nd, 2016. I call to order this meeting of the Goose Creek CISD Board of Trustees. Before proceeding with tonight's agenda, I would like to remind everyone in the audience that this meeting is being recorded through video and audio technology. Also at this time, I ask that anybody and everybody silence or turn off your electrical devices. Thank you. Ms. Woods, was this meeting properly posted?
Yes.
And do we have a quorum?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Dr. Duarte.
President Richard, school board members, Mr. O'Brien, we will begin the opening ceremonies with the prayer led by Janice Coffey. Everyone, please rise.
Please bow with me. Lord God, we thank you for this day. We thank you for beginnings. We thank you for the beginning of a new school year, all the excitement that comes with it. We thank you for the fact that, as far as I understand, our students got to school safely today, got fed lunch, got home safely, so we had a successful first day. I just ask your watchful care over all of our students throughout this school year, over all the teachers and employees who work for this district. Guide them all, help them all to be very successful in their endeavors this year. We thank you, Lord God, for your guidance. We ask you to guide this school board this evening as we make our decisions. We ask you to watch over our world situation and just bring as much peace as possible. We pray in your most holy name. Amen.
Amen.
The pledges will be led by Jessica Woods.
Place your hand over your heart and face the flags. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible.
You may be seated, and we have no recognitions for tonight.
Thank you. Next on our agenda is citizens' participation. Ms. Garcia. We have no one signed up. Thank you. Moving on to number 4, approval of minutes. We have to approve minutes from August 1st special board meeting, August 8th regular board meeting. Let's take them one at a time. August 1st.
I move we approve the minutes of the August 1st special board meeting.
Second.
We have a motion from Ms. Coffey, a second from Mr. Laredo to approve the minutes of the August 1st special meeting. I was calling to see any discussion. All in favor, please raise your right hand. None opposed. The motion passes 6-4, 1 absent. The August 8th meeting.
I move we approve the minutes of the August 8th regular board meeting.
Second.
We have a motion from Ms. Coffey, a second from Mr. Laredo to approve the minutes of the August 8th regular board meeting. Any discussion? All in favor, raise your right hand. None opposed. That motion passes 6-4, 1 absent. All right. Moving along, discussion items. Superintendent's reports. Mr. O'Brien.
Yes, for the superintendent's report this evening, we have Dr. Duarte presenting the 2016 accountability report, what we have so far.
So I'm going to be talking to us about our accountability for the 2016 school year. What I do want to point out is the state has not released any of our data tables, and they have not released any of the distinction designations. We're hoping on the 26th they will start to release some of that information. So what you're getting is just the very basic information that we've received up to date. The first thing I want to talk to you about is our index system, and you guys have seen this before. We are held to an accountability standard within 4 indices. You've got Index 1, which is considered student achievement. We're going to look at 3 years worth of data, but I want you to understand it's like looking at apples to oranges to grapefruits. It's changed every single year over the 3 years. In 2014, we had our modified assessments for special ed students still intact. When we got to 2015, we had no math scores because that was our first year with the new essential knowledge and skills. Then when we look at 2016 in Index 1, we've now included math, all of our accommodated results, as well as our STAR Alt. So you're going to see that there are changes within that accountability. When we look at our scores for Index 2, that's the student progress. What they're measuring is, did a student grow a certain level from last year's test to the present year test? When we look at our Index 3, and of course in Index 2 we added math this year. When we look at Index 3, this is our performance gap, where they look at the scores of our economically disadvantaged and our two largest subpopulations and see how they're doing accountability-wise within their assessments. And then Index 4 looks at our post-secondary readiness. Now, a difference this year is we had the math test count. And a student has to score at a certain level, the final level 2, in 2 areas to hit this indicator. In the previous year, they only took a reading test. You only had to do it in 1 assessment. And this year, they had their reading and their math in 3rd grade or 6th grade or those areas. So the first thing I want to look at is our district data. If you look on the bottom corner in green, you're going to see the state cut scores. A district or campuses had to score at a certain level to meet the standard. So if we focus on 2016, for Index 1 we had to have a 60. For Index 2 we had to score a 22. For Index 3 a 28, and for Index 4 a 60. So when we look at the district scores, you're going to see Index 1 we had 72% of our students pass their tests. On Index 2 we scored a 37 on student progress where we needed a 22. On Index 3 we scored a 39 on the performance gap where we had to score a 28, and in Index 4 for post-secondary readiness we had a 71 and the state expected a 60. So overall we hit all of those cut scores, and the district met standard. Now I gave you the data for the state and the Region 4 area, and you're going to see in 2014 and 15 we were very, very close, if not right below or right above. We do not have that information for 2016 at this point. We have one campus that's evaluated under alternative accountability standards, and that is Peter E. Highland. So you're going to have their 3 years of data. And the one thing I do want to point out is on Index 4, they score higher than 100, but the state will not give you higher than 100. So we get all of our points within that index, where the state expectation is you get a 33. So Peter E. Highland is doing a phenomenal job in certain components within their assessment and accountability. So you're going to see cutoff scores 35, 8, 13, 33 compared to the districts where we're at 52, 19, 29, and 100.
I was just going to point out Index 4 is closing the achievement gap.
Index 4 is the post-secondary readiness.
Post-secondary readiness.
So it's their graduation plans, SAT, ACT, advanced courses.
The achievement gap was number 3.
Correct.
And then what was number 1 and number 2?
Number 1 is the percentage of students that pass any test that they're given, and then Index 2 is student progress. So they're showing that year's growth. So our Peter E. Highland met standard. We have our 3 traditional high schools. You've got GCM, Sterling, and Lee, and then we have Impact, our early college high school, and they have a different set of standards that they would need to meet. So you're looking at a 60, 17, 30, and a 60, and you're going to notice at our 3 high schools, we exceeded all 4 areas.
Okay, and you said that comparing these between 2014, 15, and 16, and apples is orange to grapefruit. So the scores that we're looking at on, say, 2015 at Lee that went down on 2016, but they're not the same accountability standards for those 2 years. So
that's correct. So what you're looking at is, for Lee in 2015, you had biology that counted, you had your English language arts that counted, and your U.S. history.
So it's more appropriate to compare Lee to the state cut, not Lee to itself over the 14, 15, 16.
Correct. Now, what we do is we like to look at 3 years data because that gives us information on what we need to focus on for that campus. So we always continue to look at our historical data. It kind of drives where we're going to place our resources at the campuses.
Right. I guess my only concern, though, is that, like, even with Sterling and GCM, you have higher numbers in 2015 than you do in 2016, so we want to be sure that we're not actually comparing those 2 years to one another because they have different...
Correct.
Okay.
So we have our 5 junior schools, and you're going to notice some of those cut scores increase. Index 2 for a high school was 70. Now for a junior school, it's at 30. Index 3 has increased to a 26, but Index 4 has decreased to a 13 when a high school was held to a higher standard. And that's because a high school has a lot more areas to cover within Index 4. When you look at a junior high or an elementary, all they're looking at is, did students in 2 or more tests score level 2 final? So it's much more challenging to get those higher scores. So again, when we look at each index, you're going to see we're above the state expectation for every single campus. We also have most of our junior schools, as you point out, within high school, we dropped between 15 and 16 because we added all of our special ed assessments and we added the math component. But Baytown maintained between 2015 and 2016. So with some really focused interventions, you can start to see that they'll begin to make that progress. We have our 15 elementaries because Hopper does not have the grade levels for accountability, so they are aligned with Highland scores. So we start with Alamo, Austin, Bowie, Carver, and Harlem. Again, we've got our cut scores, 60. Index 2 goes up to a 32. Index 3 goes up to a 28. And Index 4 drops to a 12. So everybody met those standards. Now, one of the campuses that I do want to highlight is Harlem Elementary. Last year, Harlem had 59% of their students pass the assessments for the accountability piece. With the standard at 60, we needed to see that progress. And so you're going to notice for Harlem, they went from 59% passing to 69% passing when we added all students into the mix. So they did a phenomenal job in really moving that campus forward academically. The next 5 campuses, we've got Highlands, Lamar, San Jacinto, Asheville Smith, and Travis Elementary. 2 schools that we had to focus on are our focus campuses, and that is Lamar and Asheville Smith. So when we look at the state cut scores, for Lamar Elementary, they needed a 60. They scored a 71 in Index 1. For Index 2, they needed a 32. They're at a 41. You're going to see Index 3 closing the achievement gap, 41, and their Index 4 post-secondary, they're at a 34. So principal has been there for 3 years working with the campus with a focused intervention plan, and we're really seeing the growth for the campus.
For the Index 4 for the post-secondary, what are they looking at in elementary?
So they're looking at, if I'm a 3rd grader and I take a reading and a math test, I have to score in both reading and math at the level 2 final phase-in.
Okay.
And that's how I earn what you'd call a point towards that measure. So if a student passed the test but didn't hit level 2 final, then they wouldn't count towards that score. So same thing with Asheville Smith. You see that growth and progress where they've gone from a 66 to a 72. You're going to see Index 2 had growth, Index 3, and great growth in Index 4 for that post-secondary readiness. And our last 5 campuses are Crockett, De Zavala, Victoria Walker, Banuelos, and Clark. You're going to notice Banuelos and Clark, we have 2 years data because they're just starting their 3rd year. Again, some very, very strong scores. If you look at Crockett for Index 2 on student progress, they earned 56 points where the state was expecting 32. So again, some great highlights that our principals and staff and teachers on the campus were able to produce. So one thing that we looked at as a district is the index 1, because that is the percentage of students that are passing the tests on the campuses. And so when we look at just high school and focusing on high school, Peter E. Highland and Impact are kind of outlier campuses. Peter E. Highland is an alternative campus, and then Impact is our early college high school, where we have a very great partnership on working towards those associate's degrees with our students. So when we look at our traditional campuses, Lee, GCM, and Sterling, what we're able to do is really focus our action plans on supporting those campuses that would have the greatest need. Very, very close overall within their scores and their passing percentages. We looked at the same information for our junior schools. And then for our elementary campuses. Now, when we get the official data tables, we'll be able to break this down looking at specifically writing, reading, math, science, and social studies. So we really have that focus for our district level content specialists to lend support at the campuses.
Dr. Duarte, could I ask a question here on the Index 1? Are these first-time testers only, or do these include the students, like at the high school, if they're taking the Algebra 1 for the second time and they pass it the second time, does that count? At the elementary, they get it twice in 1 year if they don't pass it after we do the SSI. Do all two, and I know the third one did not get administered this year, but does that mean first and second round, that's what we produced, or first round only?
So good question. So for high school, for end of course, it's all testers. So if I'm a retester and I'm a junior and I'm struggling in English, I'm going to count every single year until I pass. And the year I pass, you get the positive credit, and then I'm done. For junior school and elementary, your 5th and your 8th graders, it's first and second administration that will count. So that can only improve your scores.
Okay, thank you.
And that's all the data we've received at this point. Again, we'll have a accountability presentation too when we get our distinctions and when we get our specific data tables.
One quick question. The item 3 and 4, what were they again?
So index 3 is closing the achievement gap, where you look at your low SES, your economically disadvantaged, and you look at your 2 largest sub-pops. So it might be Hispanic and African American at one campus, it could be African American white at another campus, and we have one school that's just Hispanic. There is no second.
And what was number 4?
And the index 4 is your post-secondary readiness, so it's children scoring at the high levels.
That index is also aligned with our board goal,
Yeah.
closing the achievement gaps.
Any other questions? Thank you, Dr. Duarte. Duarte.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great job.
Our next report is going to be from LAN and our team. Okay, just you. Goose Creek CSD determination and adoption of prevailing wage rates.
Prevailing wage rates.
Good evening. So we're here today to request the adoption of alternate prevailing wage rates, but first I want to talk about what prevailing wage rates are and why do we need them. So what are prevailing wage rates? They are rates that are currently being paid to workers for their specific construction trade. For example, the rate that would be paid to a plumber or an electrician. And why are they required? They're required by law. The law states that public entities, that would include school districts such as Goose Creek, to use prevailing wage rates on their construction projects. And these prevailing wage rate laws, they've operated on a national level and on a state level as a check against the tendency of the construction industry to degenerate into destructive wage and price competition. So this price competition can drive the skilled and experienced workers from the industry, reduce productivity and quality. It's a way to guarantee that a certain rate is paid to those trade workers. So why does Goose Creek need these specific prevailing wage rates? As stated in the previous slide, it is law, and that's Texas Government Code 2258.021, and that's what says that prevailing wage rates are required for similar work in a locality for public entities, and that would include our school district. The next provision, Chapter 2258.022, it states that you can either determine prevailing wage rates by using a survey of wages paid for similar work, or by using the prevailing wage rates that's determined by the U.S. Department of Labor. And that's the Davis-Bacon Act that we hear about. So further, if we were to use any federal funds, we would be required by law to use Davis-Bacon. Goose Creek would not typically fall into that category just because we don't typically have any federal funding for our construction projects. So we bring to you approximately every 2 years a request to approve current prevailing wage rates. Typically they're updated maybe once or twice a year. We typically do that every 2 years, and it's applicable to every forthcoming construction project. So for many previous years, the administration has proposed the adoption of only the Davis-Bacon wage rates. That's the one that we currently have adopted right now. And the last one that we adopted was in early 2015. So in this next slide, you'll see what the different type of prevailing wage rates are used in our area. We have Davis-Bacon, Harris County, City of Houston, Texas Gulf Coast area. And these are just to show you which ones are used. Obviously, the county uses those and City of Houston, but in particular I want to point out the Texas Gulf Coast area wage rates. You'll see a list of area school districts that use the Texas Gulf Coast area, and I also want to specify that these rates for Texas Gulf Coast area are very specific to school type construction, not unlike Harris County or City of Houston that would have different trades that they work on. So why change our rates now? In recent bids and conversations with general contractors, we've gotten some feedback from the subcontractors that bid that consistently indicate a couple of things. The first item is that the subcontractors don't like to submit bids to general contractors for only Davis-Bacon wage rates that are being paid on those construction jobs. And the second item that we've determined is that we're able to save money on these construction projects if we could use the Texas area. They're more aligned to the region and pay that other contractors can pay their subcontractors. This is just a chart as a comparison. The classification that you see on the left side, those are the type of trades, the type of workers. The middle one is the Davis-Bacon. That's the one that we have currently adopted. And the one that you see on the right-hand side is Texas Gulf Coast area. Mm-hmm. That's just a comparison. I'm going to quote what Melissa Darta said. It's comparing apples to oranges sometimes because they don't always list the same trades for both of the prevailing wage rates. These are some that aligned with each other. So we're here tonight to seek approval of the adoption of the Texas Gulf Coast area prevailing wage rate. We really see it as a benefit to the district, a best value to the district. You also have two attachments that I've provided for you, the current one and the most updated wage rates for Texas Gulf Coast area.
Brenda, I've noticed that we don't have as many contractors bidding on our jobs. Do you think there's a correlation? Is that the feedback that you're referencing?
Yes, yes. They're having issues with their subcontractors that they have to pay at the Davis-Bacon rates in comparison to other contractors that are paying.
So one contractor would have an advantage over another contractor
Right.
bidding the same job.
Correct.
If that company had the Texas Gulf Coast area, and the other one had Davis-Bacon. But if it's us adopting a prevailing wage, then both companies would have to apply the same standard. And so, is what you're saying. So some companies are not applying or bidding on our
So
jobs because
the
of
issue
that?
that we're seeing is that we are requiring our contractors to pay Davis-Bacon rates. However, that same contractor may be having another construction job where they're paying the Texas Gulf Coast rates. And so they have a hard time having their subcontractors bid on other work for them as well, because the Davis-Bacon rates tend to be higher. And so sometimes they won't, the contractor themselves won't bid on our project because they're having to pay considerable amount more.
And it ultimately cuts into their profit margin.
Correct.
And it drives the price up too for us.
So why were we on it, if we had to do this every 2 years, why didn't we switch over 2 years ago?
I can't answer that question. I'm not sure. I just know that in the history, I don't think we've ever adopted anything other than Davis-Bacon at Goose Creek. I'm not sure why.
And Davis-Bacon deals mostly with federal jobs, right?
Yeah, it's a federal.
Yeah, because I know that they have federal
They're federal rates.
Yeah.
They do say that they're made for this area, but it may not necessarily align to this area.
So I can answer to some degree that we were advised by council 3 years ago to adopt it. We're not using the same council in all of our construction jobs at this time, and so we're not getting the same recommendation now.
I can understand that we were doing more federal jobs and we was getting federal funds,
Right.
that we would use it, but, I mean.
We don't,
Yeah.
so we're not required. The law says you can use Davis-Bacon or you can do a survey, and the survey that we're providing was already done, not by us, by PBK.
Any other questions?
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Right, moving on to action items, 6A.
Well, at this time, administration would present a resolution expressing intent to finance expenditures to be incurred for property located at 201 West Y Drive, Baytown, Texas, 77521 from local funds with the intention of a future reimbursement from bond funds. I might note that this is the location also known as 201 West YMCA Drive, as the street name has changed since the initial transaction.
I'd like to move for approval.
I'll second.
We have a motion from Mr. Laredo, a second from Ms. Cockrell to approve the resolution expressing intent to finance expenditures from local funds with the intention of future reimbursement from bond funds. Any discussion? I would point out that this was on a previous board agenda that we asked them to pull and bring us back more information. So if anyone has any questions that we brought up earlier, you may want to ask them now for clarification.
I did ask Mr. O'Brien earlier, but just so that we all know, our purchase agreement is for $1 million. So would you explain to us why this is $1,200,000?
We do have Margie and Mr. Sage, our bond counsel, here with us this evening. They could further explain.
Okay.
Good evening. This is Mr. Tom Sage. He's our bond attorney. He's represented us on all the bond sales I've been through with since I've been in this
My whole
role.
career,
So
which
I'm going to turn it over to him.
started
I think
when
he
I
can,
had hair, so it's a pleasure to see y'all this evening. The reimbursement resolution, let me just go through it really quickly. Under the Internal Revenue Code, we're allowed to issue tax-exempt bonds. And one of the things we're allowed to do with the tax-exempt bonds is to reimburse yourself for a prior expenditure of cash. Basically, you preserve the right to finance this expenditure in the future. You're not obligated to, but you preserve that right. I'm getting to your $1.2 million question. Given that the purchase price is $1 million, and we're putting this together, and you can completely blame the lawyer on this one. Generally, we kind of, for lack of a better term, kind of round up. There's no obligation to go up to $1.2 million, and you can only reimburse the actual amounts that you spend. But given that I didn't really know what all the closing costs were and anything other thing that went into that, whether geotech surveys or or any other diligence and costs that y'all incurred, I rounded up to make sure that we could capture all the expenditures associated with this purchase.
So
we can
all acquisition costs.
Exactly. And so, generally there's a purchase price, but there are other things that go into buying the land. And so I wanted to make sure we picked all of that up. Again, we can only reimburse ourselves the amounts that we actually spend, and we have limits on kind of when we can do so, which would be, in this case, 18 months from the closing or 3 years from today, or the earlier of those two dates, which sounds like it's going to be the 18-month date. And we would need to issue new tax-exempt debt and reimburse yourself, or not. If at the time we issue debt in the future or decide to, if the board at that time decides you prefer to simply have this as a cash expenditure and not reimburse the general fund, then that's fine too. This simply, if we don't adopt this, we lose the opportunity for future reimbursement. But again, there's no obligation to do so.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mr. Sage.
Sure, happy to.
But you did point out that we would have to issue these bonds.
Yep.
Within the 18-month period if we decided to do so to reimburse ourselves.
Yes.
So that
From
would indicate
the
that
close date.
From the 18 months from the close date or 3 years.
Right.
Sometime in that period.
Sometime in that period, if the district goes through a bond election and we have a bond issuance, or any other tax-exempt financing, actually we're purchasing land, so we couldn't do maintenance tax notes. It's really voted bonds. And whether the district pursues that or not is completely up to y'all.
Right, but in section 1 it says we are declaring our intent to do so.
Yes, we have to, under the tax code, you have to express your present intent to reimburse yourself in the future in order to be able to do so. And so that language is directly from the Internal Revenue Code.
Thank you.
Anything else?
I just had so if we happen to sell a piece of property that we have somewhere, can we take that money and reimburse ourselves?
That's a more complicated question in that, how is it financed? Are the bonds that financed it still outstanding? Do we have other voted projects that we would apply that to? In a pure sense, if the debt was not outstanding, it would just be your money. So it's not a true reimbursement, it's just cash to the district for the sale of an
It goes
asset.
straight to the deposit.
I mean, yeah.
Okay.
In this case, let's think of this property. If you turned around and sold it, you would simply take it back in your general fund because we have yet to finance it.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right, we have a motion on the table to
Thanks.
accept this resolution, intent to finance expenditures. All in favor, please raise your right hand. Any opposed? Motion passes 6-4, 1 absent. Thank you.
6B, consideration of consent agenda. Adopt the prevailing wage rate schedule, hourly rates only for the school construction trades for the Texas Gulf Coast areas as determined through a wage rate survey conducted by PBK Architects Incorporated for construction of all district projects. Number 2, memorandum of understanding between GCCISD and Hands of Healing Residential Treatment Center. Number 3, pregnancy-related services on-campus compensatory education home instruction waiver.
Does anyone want to pull any of the items from the consent agenda?
I'd like to move that we approve consent agenda items 1 through 3, B1 through B3.
I'll second that motion.
We have a motion from Ms. Laredo, a second from Ms. Coffey to approve items 1, 2, and 3 of the consent agenda. Any discussion?
Just a quick question, just about the home pregnancy, the waiver. Can you explain that to me a little bit better?
Who would have?
Dr. Duarte. Welcome to the table.
I'm just curious. I'm just, curious George, and I.
So this waiver provides flexibility for a district. So if we do have a student that is pregnant and has either prenatal or post needs, that we're able to provide the instruction for the student, and it can be adjusted hours. It could be in-home support versus in-class support. So it just gives us flexibility within the student's school day to meet their instructional needs, as well as support the medical needs of the student or the child.
Good. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Show of hands, please. All in favor of consent agenda, please raise your right hand. Any opposed? Motion passes 6-4, 1 absent. Okay, moving on to C, future board agenda items, board training, and board meetings. So let's address item 1 first. Any future board agenda items that anyone on the board would like to see us place? Or what can we expect in the future from Mr. O'Brien?
Follow-up to our accountability ratings will be forthcoming in about a month, I would say, from now. And then as a board training, I know that I'm not trying to jump ahead, but
You're jumping ahead.
I'm jumping ahead. I'll
Yes,
hold
sir.
that.
I had one, but I was trying to
Okay.
think of.
All right. All right, now we'll move on to board training.
That would be at a previous board member's request. We're trying to schedule Dr. McLeod in for training, possibly a workshop rather than a board meeting.
I would like to ask the board if you would consider us, I'd like to have 2 items on a team of 8 workshop that would have Dr. McLeod, invite Dr. McLeod to come present, and also for us to review the board goals at the request of Ms. Coffey, which I think all of us want to review the board goals. I would like to know what your availability would be on Thursday, September 15th.
That's the night of the Lee College Gala. So I won't be
Okay, so, all right, so we had gotten some dates from Dr. McLeod, and 2 of the 3, Mr. O'Brien wasn't available, so we may have to go back to the drawing board on that because we can't meet her calendar until after October 6th sometime, okay? We had 3 dates were given to us, and 2 of the 3, Mr. O'Brien is going to be out of town.
Mr. Shard, is it possible that maybe we separate those into 2 workshops? Just because I think those are going to be pretty, well, one, I don't know how long Dr. McLeod would take, but I have a feeling that if I know our tendencies, we'll be here for a while for the goal.
Well, we wanted to get that included in the team of 8 training and get as much credit as we could for it. I'm willing to spend a little extra time to get more CEC credit if the rest of the board is. Okay. The board goal review may not be as knockdown drag out as it was last year. I think we may just want to be refining them, I'm hoping.
maybe.
Maybe just refining them.
Sounds good.
Okay. Let's, if you wouldn't mind, look at your calendars since September and the early part of October is out. Could everyone look at their calendar possibly for the 2nd or 3rd week of October? Now, we do have a board meeting on October the 10th.
Could we do October the 17th?
I'm okay on October 17th at this point. So far into the distance.
I have a commitment that night, I'm
Okay.
sorry.
17th, that's a Monday.
What about Tuesday nights? Is anyone
I can't do Tuesday.
can't do Tuesdays? All right.
I
What
can't
about
do Tuesdays or Thursdays.
Wednesday?
Wednesday the 19th.
I don't mind Wednesdays. I have a dot on my calendar. That's okay. I'm okay on Wednesdays.
Sunday morning.
I'll be out of town.
Okay.
Oh, my God.
Well, how about backing it up to Wednesday, October 12th?
The 12th works better for me.
You have something every Wednesday,
Not every Wednesday, no.
but you do on the 12th?
Football and Sea Scouts.
I might have something on the 12th.
A Wednesday.
Did we already knock off October 17th?
Yes.
No, that we knocked off the 19th.
What about
Think
the
so.
17th?
Also. What about the
17th,
24th?
18th, 19th, and 20th we've knocked off.
The 24th, okay?
That's a board meeting.
24th.
How big is our stuff for, I mean, we can have a really quick board meeting.
I mean, we're talking 2 months in advance, October
to them.
24th. That's 2 months in
Really
advance.
quick board meeting.
What is the?
I don't know
5th?
if we can get all this done on the night of a regular board meeting.
What
I
about
will not
October
say
5th?
exercise it, that's too much time for a board meeting and
What about the
Workshop.
26th?
What about the 5th?
Dr. McLeod can't come.
Mr. O'Brien's out the entire first week of October.
Who told me he can take off?
So the 26th of October would work?
26.
You can't be off. You gotta come.
26 is good. Well,
Is that? you
That's
said
a Wednesday,
football?
though.
Yeah, that's,
Okay. Anyone cannot make October 26th. God, that's 2 months away.
God,
Y'all have
it
great,
is.
y'all must have really,
well, and so
Full
did
calendars.
the woman did as well, our.
right, she was
You don't
tight
get
with her
your
schedule.
point.
okay, we'll shoot for October 26th.
So I move that we schedule a special meeting for setting board goals, reviewing board goals, and I've forgotten what our other
Presentation from Dr. McLeod.
presentation from Dr. McLeod for Wednesday, the 26th of October at 6:30 PM.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion from Ms. Coffey, a second from Mr. Laredo. Set a special board training, and we'll call it Team of 8 training for Wednesday, October 26th at 6:30. Any discussion? And Mr. Poppy's going to have to make his schedule fit. All in favor, please raise your hand. That motion passes 6-4-0 against. Thank you.
That's gonna be the 6:30, right?
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Now, item number 3, we need to have a special, we need to schedule a special meeting to canvass the TRE election results. We can't do it before September 22nd because of military ballots possible. Now, I have been told,
21st.
We can, the 21st.
Always, right?
It was a
okay,
Tuesday.
we were picking the 22nd for a reason, though. Was there a reason for the 22nd?
Because we thought it.
Because when we
couldn't
spoke to her,
have
she
done
said
the
it had to be the
I know.
22nd.
No,
So
she
now it's
came back
21st?
and she said the
Okay.
21st.
The thing about this meeting, it only requires 2 board members to be there to canvass the votes.
Oh, okay.
So it's not it does not require the quorum. So we're just looking for 2 people to volunteer to be here sometime on Wednesday, the 21st. We can set whatever time we want. You be
Oh.
okay?
Yeah, I can be here.
Okay. I can be here on the 21st.
And if 1:30
At
is a
what
good
time would y'all like to do?
If 1:30 is the time when y'all are going to set the agenda for the
Well,
next meeting,
That's correct.
yeah, that would be fine with me.
1:30?
Yeah.
1:30, anyone can get there 1:30? Okay, so we need a motion.
What meeting?
I move that we schedule a special meeting to canvass the TRE election results for Wednesday, September the 21st at 1:30 PM.
Oh, okay.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion from Ms. Coffey, a second from Mr. Laredo to set a special board meeting to canvass TRE election results on September 21st at 1:30 PM.
And
Any
so
dis-
even though they can't be here, they could still approve that date. Is that correct, as long as we know
That's
that 2 are
correct.
coming?
That's
Okay.
correct. Any discussion? All in favor, please signify, raising your hand. Good. 7-4, 1 absent. 6-4, 1 absent. Thank you.
When is the TRE
Okay.
in September?
At this time, the board will now recess into a closed session pursuant to the following sections of the Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code Sections 551.071, 551.072, 551.073, 551.074, 551.075, 551.076, 551.082, 551.083, 551.084, and 551.087. No action will be taken while the board is in closed meeting. Being into open session, no action was taken while we were in closed session. Moving on with our agenda. Consideration of personnel. Mr. O'Brien.
As the board has already received notification of teacher elections and resignations, administration now recommends election of Lee Abate as assistant principal at De Zavala Elementary School.
I move to approve Lee Abate as assistant principal at De Zavala Elementary School.
I second.
We have a motion from Ms. Coffey, a second from Ms. Cockrell for the election of Leah Abate as an assistant principal at De Zavala. Any discussion? Any discussion? All in favor, please raise your right hand. That motion carries 6-4, 1 absent.
Next, we have consideration of a secondary assistant principal, Brian Aiken, at Robert E. Lee High School.
I move to approve Brian Aiken as assistant principal at Robert E. Lee High School.
I second.
We have a motion from Ms. Coffey, a second from Ms. Cockrell for the election of Brian Aiken as assistant principal at Robert E. Lee High School. Any discussion? All in favor, please raise your hand. All opposed? Motion carries 4 for, 2 opposed, 1 absent.
Have election of Ashbel Smith Elementary Counselor Carla Vaughn.
I move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion from Ms. Cockrell, a second from Mr. Laredo to approve the election of Carla Vaughn as a counselor at Ashbel Smith Elementary. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate with the right hand. Any opposed?
I'm sorry, I missed that. I'm for.
Thank you. Motion carries 6 for, 1 absent.
Administration recommends for the selection of bilingual ESL instructional specialist, Ms. Sheila Chabera.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion from Mr. Laredo, a second from Ms. Coffey to approve the election of Sheila Cabara as bilingual ESL instructional specialist. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by raising your right hand. Motion carries 6 for, 1 absent. And before adjourning, I would like to remind everybody that early voting for the tax ratification election will begin on August the 24th, and the election date is on September the 10th. Having no further items to discuss, we are adjourned at 7:49.